Hi everybody, my name is Scott Yazel. I am the president of 102550 Homeless Project. I am the host of the Scott Show podcast, which we do every single morning. We do the Scott Show wake-up call. And now I want to present to you folks the newest channel, the newest show on the Scott Show network. And it is This Day in History. So what we're going to do every single day, including the days that I don't actually get on the podcast, I'm going to record the day in history. So every single day, you'll get what is going on this day in the history. And I think it's important. I'm going to start the show off by telling you a little bit about why I'm doing this. Because I love history. I watch documentaries on history stuff. I just watched the 60s earlier today. I watch things on World War II. I'm fascinated with this kind of stuff. And I'm going to bring to you guys the 11th channel of the 102550 Scott Show network deal, however we got going on. I'm going to figure it out one day, folks, but we've got so many different irons in the fire when it comes to what we do here that we have 11 different channels. We have so many great things that we got going on. And this one is going to be one of the most passionate ones that I'm going to have because I get to talk about history. I might go on forever, but if you guys like this show, like, share, subscribe on YouTube. Of course, we're going to be on YouTube. We're on Speaker.com. We're all over the place, and I just want to bring to you guys this day in history for December 10th. And the last thing I want to say before we get started, and this is deeply personal, you guys might notice that the picture there that I used for the little snapshot, when we podcast, you get a little snapshot picture and then the description of what it is. And this day in history, December 10th, whatever. The snapshot is my grandfather. And the reason why I love history so much is because he taught me a lot about history. So this whole series, this whole channel, everything is all to give lots of thanks and love to my grandfather, who gave me the gift of knowing what my history was. And I know I've been going on a little bit longer than I probably should have to start a show before we even talk about what's going on today. But this is, this whole series and channel is all in honor of my grandfather, Marshall Yazel. So I want to thank him for what we get to do here today. So this day in history, as we start 3 minutes into the show, go figure. This day in history is December 10th. It is the 344th day on the calendar. There are 21 days remaining until the end of the year. So if you guys ever wondered what it is, there you go. I got all my information from Wikipedia. They have a really good this day in history kind of setup. However, they don't have podcasts about it. So I'm going to make one up, and why not? I want to thank History News for liking our post. They'll probably like it every day now because we're going to be doing this every single day here on the Scott Show Network. I think it's going to be, it's the Scott Show Network. I mean, I can't hide that. That's what we got going on. So, let's get into what's been going on December 10th. And December 10th is a huge day. It's Human Rights Day. And to talk about that, Human Rights Day, 1948, it was signed. So almost 60 years ago, 50, oh my god, so many years ago. It's incredible to think of that. The Human Rights Convention is signed by the United Nations 1948 on December 10th. So that's a huge moment in history. And yes, it would be 70 years ago. So that's a long time. Also in 1984, the United Nations General Assembly recognized the Convention Against Torture. So that's something else having to do with human rights. But before we even get into all that, and that's a big thing. So it's Human Rights Day. I covered that on the Scott Show Wake Up Call. You can listen to it every day, 8 o'clock in the morning. I love this show. It's great. But back in 1041, all the way back in 1041, crazy, the son of Empress Zoe of someplace, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. If I don't try to pronounce something, it's because it's really hard to pronounce, folks. That's what it is. But he succeeds his throne to the Eastern Roman Empire as Michael V. 1041, it's the first thing on there, first thing in history. I thought that was really cool, so I want to send that on to you guys. Back in 1520, Martin Luther burns his copy of the Pope's Bull, in Surge Domini, outside Wittenberg's Ulster Gate. Back in 1520. Back in 1541, Thomas Culpeper and Francis Durham were executed for having affairs with Catherine Howard, Queen of England, and a wife of Henry VIII. Think about that. They were executed for having an affair with the Queen of England. That's just crazy. In 1684, Isaac Newton's derivation of Kepler's laws on his theory of gravity contained in the paper, which I will not pronounce, is read by the Royal Society by Edmund Halley. In 1799, France adopts the meter as its official unit of length, back in 1799. Back in 1817, Mississippi becomes the 20th United States state. Mississippi, 1817. In 1861, the American Civil War, which is, you guys will see it on the little caption on the bottom. You know, I have tags, so Civil War was a big deal. The Confederate States of America accept a rival state's government pronouncement that declares Kentucky to be the 13th state of the Confederacy. So Kentucky was the 13th state of the Confederacy in the American Civil War back in 1861. That's a trip. Alright, let's see what else we got. 1864, Sherman's March to the Sea. Major General William Sherman's Union Army troops read the outer defensive of Savannah, Georgia. Sherman's March to the Sea of the Civil War. Back in 1868, 4 years after the Civil War. 4 years after the Civil War. The first traffic lights are installed. And everybody seems to be liking this history thing, so I'm pumped. Alright. And it is funny because Brexit News just liked it, and now we're talking about something in London. The first traffic lights installed outside the Palace of Westminster in London, resembling railway signals. They use arms that fall down and are illuminated by night by red and green gas lamps. So check that out. Back in 1877, the Russo-Turkish War, the Russian army captures the city after 5 months siege. 5 months of being at siege, they finally capture this city. The garrison of 25,000 surviving Turks surrenders. The Russian victory is decisive for the outcome of the war and the liberation of Bulgaria. Wow. And who knew this happened, this history stuff happened, until you read about it. 1877, nobody's even alive from then. I mean, they would be really super old. Just saying. 140-something years old. Mark Twain's Adventures of Huck Finn, published in 1884, and all the kids in the world are like, yeah, I read that book in school. The Spanish-American War, the Treaty of Paris is signed, officially ending the conflict of the Spanish-American War that happened December 10th, 1898. Amazing stuff. In 1901, the first Nobel Prizes were awarded. So today is actually Alfred Nobel Day. Him very, very much being known for all the peace in the world that he caused, and also the invention of dynamite, because that's what Nobel is known for, the invention of dynamite. Back in 1906, a relation, Theodore Roosevelt, wins the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in the mediation of the Russo-Japanese War, becoming the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So that might be a Jeopardy question for all you Jeopardy folks. There you go. In 1932, Thailand becomes a constitutional monarchy. And one of the biggest news things I saw when I was going through this news thing, and I'm going to go through it a little bit. I'm not coming in this cold. I'm not going to read all of them because some of them, they're hard to read. They don't make it the easiest on this site, but whatever works. Back in 1936, Edward VIII signs the Instrument of Abdication. Meaning, he gives up the throne. He's going to marry the woman he loves who's already married. Whatever works there, right, folks? And that brings George as the new King of England. And, of course, George's daughter, Princess Elizabeth, becomes then Queen Elizabeth after George dies. And she's 90-something years old now, and still the Queen of England, the only queen we've ever known. If you knew Edward or George, you are in your 80s. Thank you for listening to the Scott Show, by the way. But the only queen most of us have ever known, the only queen we've ever known, except for Queen Elizabeth, who was a queen consort of George. So we've only ever known Queen Elizabeth, which is funny. I did not even think of that. World War II, the Royal Navy capital ships the Prince of Wales and the Repulse that are sunk by Imperial Japanese Navy bombers near British Malaya. There you go. Lots of cool stuff. Not a lot of cool stuff happened in 1940 in the World War II. That I can see here, that they actually put on here. Japanese take over the Philippines in 1941. 3 days earlier in 1941 was, of course, the Pearl Harbor Day. So, that happened. But then 3 days later, they took over the Philippines. So that's a trip. Now think about it. Back in the 1800s, it took 5 months to siege a city, and here they're taking over Luzon, Philippines in 3 days. Pretty trippy. The Chinese Civil War, 1949. Did you guys know there was a Chinese Civil War? Probably not. If you did, awesome, go you. The People's Liberation Army began the siege of Zhengzhou, the last held city in mainland China, forcing the President of the Republic of China and his government to retreat to Taiwan. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill received the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1953. That's kind of cool. Zanzibar regains independence from the United Kingdom as a constitutional monarchy under Sultan Jamid. 1963 that happened. 1968, Japan's biggest heist is still unsolved. 3 million yen robbery is carried out in Tokyo. I don't know if you guys ever wonder how much a yen is. I actually was going to buy something that was 999 yen, and it ended up being like $8 American. So, go figure. In 1978, the Arab-Israeli conflict, Prime Minister Begin and President of Egypt Omar Sadat, that's a hard one to say, are jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now think of that, 1978, the Arab-Israeli conflict, and they're still at war. But they tried. They really, really tried. And they have been trying forever. 1994, Maurice Barrel, a military advisor to the UN's Secretary General, says to stand down in the genocide of Rwanda back in 1994. 1996, all those many years ago, almost 21 years ago now, the new Constitution of South Africa, set up by Nelson Mandela. There you go. That's a last news we're going to touch here. The new Constitution of South Africa, 21 years old today. That's why we do this day in history. We go to some birthdays and some deaths, some really sad news. We'll go to deaths first, then we'll go to birthdays. Red Cloud, the American tribal chief, 1909, passed away. He was born in 1882 or 1822. So Red Cloud, very influential tribal chief. Otis Redding, who was a singer, songwriter, awesome dude. 1967, he passed away. Born in 1941, so he was a very, very young man when he died. There you go. And Eugene McCarthy died in 2005. He was a politician and presidential candidate. Born in 1916. And Richard Pryor died this day in 2005. And he was, quick math, 65. So, amazing actor, comedian, producer, screenwriter, whatever. Did a lot of stuff. Great guy. Really, really funny. If you guys ever get to see really great comedy, Richard Pryor, awesome. Births. We got some birthdays that we're going to celebrate today. Back in 1952, Susan Day, who was part of the Partridge Family and L.A. Law. It is her birthday today. 1952 was when she was born. 5 years later, Michael Clark Duncan, born in 1957. Kenneth Branagh, born in 1960, so happy birthday to Kenneth. Bobby Flay, who's the chef man and author and Iron Chef, 1964. And then I want to give a shout out to a guy who I like, who I think is funny. And that's Greg Giraldo. Greg Giraldo died in 2010, but this would have been his birthday today. He was born in 1965. So want to give him a special shout out up there in heaven, because he was a great comedian, one of my favorites. And when I saw that he was born today, I wanted to make sure you guys knew it. Alright, and of course it is Human Rights Day. It's Constitution Day in Thailand. It's Christian Feast Day. And really cool stuff going on today, including Alfred Nobel Day. So, Nobel Day. And we will have more information about the Nobel Prizes coming out on the Scott Show podcast. Hope you guys are liking this day in history. We had 3 people like it on Twitter already. Hopefully people are listening to the show. They're liking it. I'm loving it so far. So we're going to be back tomorrow, December 11th. I'm going to give you guys this day in history. I want to thank you guys so very much. And you guys have a very great day. Catch all of our shows. We have 11 channels now here on the Scott Show podcast. Like, share, subscribe on YouTube. And we'll see you guys here real soon on the Scott Show podcast.